June 24, 2023, a new recent blog post on the S&box website, published and written by Gary Newman, talks about the idea of code libraries within S&box. The specific blog post does go into more detail about the idea of how they'll work and why they're important to the game itself. But more specifically, this blog post states exactly why Gary Newman and Facepunch have decided to switch away completely from the Steam Workshop in favor of a new system created in-house for the Facepunch game studio to work with. Hi, I'm Iridium. Now, for the folks who don't know what S&box is, skip here because a good chunk of people are definitely going to want some context about this game, and I'm about to provide that before I get wild comments because people didn't watch the entire video. S&box is a successor to Gary's mod made by both Gary Newman and his independent game studio called Facepunch. This game has been in development for over 5 to 6 years now as a guess, and has switched game engines numerous amount of times, but have finally landed on the Source 2 engine to be its home as a game engine. Essentially, S&box is a game that is more of a platform tied with a game engine and game tools that allows its players, developers, and users to create, play, and experience whatever they're able to create depending on the tools and limits of the Source 2 engine itself. I do want to also clarify moving forward that S&box is indeed using a formula of what Gary's mod has already created for years to what it has been known for, and also using formulas from other games such as Roblox to create their own take on the platform while also contributing ideas that are already present, as mentioned within Gary's mod. Even though I've mentioned that Gary's mod and S&box are completely two different games in the past, there is some similarities in certain things that both of these games do, and also some incredibly different things that these games do too. Rather, I don't think anyone would be surprised by looking at the game off first glance and come with assumptions when it's literally made by the same person who created Gary's mod. Now that you know the context of what the game is about and its short history, let's move on to the topic of this video. Long ago in Gary's mod, there was other ways to download mods and add them to the game through websites like garysmod.org. Then, over time, Valve had implemented the Steam Workshop as a way for developers and modders to create community-made content for their games and add them in their games with lesser hassle. Over time, Gary's mod had also had its community go through and create a ton of content to put into the Steam Workshop, which grew Gary's mod to be the known staple of the game it is through its endless amount of content that a player could search and download to make their version of Gary's mod completely different and special for their S&box needs. With S&box, not only is that entirely different with the game's presentation, style, and games that are set within a completely new direction, even the systems that keep all the games, add-ons, models, and more are also seen going in this new direction too. Asset.party is Facepunch's own Steam Workshop built for S&box. It's where you'd be able to find all their assets, models, games, maps, shaders, soundscapes, and more. Literally anything you'd see or need for either creating a game or to play a game straight at your fingertips. For many that wonder, well, this seems dumb, why didn't they just use the Steam Workshop? According to the blog post, Asset.party works entirely different from the Steam Workshop in terms of being one big file system of individual files, where Steam's version is just the same, but with zipped up files. When downloading from the workshop, you download everything that is in the zip file no matter if you already have some of those files. In Asset.party's case, each file downloads individually, so if there's 10 maps that share the same materials, you'd have to download and store them only once. This is specifically a huge game changer in a positive way for many people who have feared that S&box would be a download fest just like Gary's mod when joining heavily modded servers. It also ties into the idea of how games will play and also load for you in S&box too, making it a lot more convenient and quicker to joining your favorite servers or games you'd want to play after a long day. It also ties into the new system that is provided for S&box and how it utilizes servers and game modes into a more optimized method, which I covered in a video right here if you want to know more about that. The blog post itself also goes into even more interesting details, stating that with Asset.party, they're allowed to have more flexibility in terms of looking at how many other assets are being used within a map or game, and are able to provide in-depth analysis to developers who'd like to know this information too. Another point from the blog post states that even with the idea of switching over to their own system in regards to all this content, it's also mentioned that Steam's Workshop has provided a good service since its release 10 years ago. Now, for some that do wonder about source code, this is a rather interesting one to mention. It also says in the blog post that especially when things get really desperate, you might want to let people see the source code. So with the Asset.party system, it allows you to post up a link to the project's GitHub if the developers choose to do so. It's rather incredibly refreshing to see how majority of these new systems made for S&box work and function but also now as to why specifically Gary and his team at Facepunch have taken out the time and years to get everything lined up for the vision of S&box. Of course, it'll be interesting in time once we get to see more into the future of the game's release and how developers, players, and users in the game get to use, feature, and experience the content that will be provided for it. Speaking of content, check out this video where I talk about S&box's new invite code section that was added and more. Thank you for watching.